All right, so today the devotional comes from Genesis 22. And it's actually the whole chapter, but I'm going to pick just one verse out of it for the interest of time. Genesis chapter 22, verse 14. Verse 14. Where it says, "So Abraham called the name of that place, 'The Lord will provide.' As it is said to this day, 'On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided.'" Amen. Now, before I go into that, I wanted to show you some photos, if that's okay. That was 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, at the top of a mountain called Kilimanjaro, right next door in Tanzania. And it was a gorgeous, gorgeous mountaintop. They call it the Roof of Africa. I climbed it with 3 friends. I was supposed to climb it with 7 friends. There were supposed to be a bunch of guys coming from Tokyo, some coming from, Uganda and so forth. But all the guys bailed, and so it turned out that I climbed with 3 ladies. It was just me and 3 ladies. And the porters were like, I'm like, what do you want? Just say it. It's like, how shall we make the tent arrangements? And I said, no, ask the real question you want to ask. Like, oh, so which one is your wife? And then all 3 of them goes, oh, no, that's June, and we are his 3 wives. And we're climbing the mountain together. But all jokes aside, it was an amazing thing, because this was my 40th birthday morning when we reached the summit. It was a 6-day hike up the mountain, and on the morning of my 40th birthday, we reached the mountaintop. And the reason I wanted to show you this is it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You see scenes that you just cannot see at sea level. As you're climbing, you have to, it's 6 days, so, tent here, camp there. And this is, I think, day 3. You can see our camp there. The stars are incredible, but the thunder clouds are, you're higher than the thunder clouds. And so when the thunder cloud is there, the stars are above it too. It's really weird. It's very, very surreal. And that's the thundercloud with the lightning inside, and here we are camping. It's a tough trip, very tough trip. By day 5, in fact, day 4, you're running out of oxygen, okay? There's not enough oxygen at that altitude, and so you're breathing really hard. Yeah, and you're walking really slowly because it takes so much energy, and there's not enough oxygen to burn to take that step. You're also very hungry because no matter how much you eat, you're constantly walking. Your body is constantly fighting the temperature. So, you have a whole plate of spaghetti, pasta, and meat sauce, and then it's gone in 3 hours or 5. I climbed, it was 6 days. By the time I came down, I had lost 7 kilograms in 7 days. I was losing a kilogram per day climbing the mountain. So if any of you look at, these Facebook ads saying, the best way to lose weight, that's not correct. The best way to lose weight is just climb that mountain. You come down, your clothes are falling off your hip, okay? But that's how physically tough climbing that mountain was. And then you get to the night of the 5th day. You have not slept, and however, that's when you climb. 10:30 p.m. is when you start climbing to get to the peak. And I remember asking the porter or the ranger, I said, I'd rather climb in the morning. Why are we doing this at night? And he told me something I'll never forget. He said there are two main reasons that we're climbing at night. Number one is very, very scientific. Well, actually, he said there are three. He says, don't you want to be at the mountaintop on your 40th birthday morning and see the sunrise? I'm like, yeah, that's poetic and everything, but I don't want to die. So is it worth it? And he's like, okay, well, there are two other reasons. One is scientific. If some of you have some exposure to meteorology, you know that the atmosphere comes down at night, and then it shrinks at night. It expands in the daytime, right? And at night, when you climb and it shrinks, that means there's more concentrated oxygen at ground level. And so when you're going to hit the top, which is almost 6,000 meters, you have a little more oxygen in the air. So I thought, okay, good one. What's the second one? And he said, this is the one that I'll never forget. He said, when we start climbing the summit in the daytime, people quit. People quit because they can see the summit, and it looks terrifying. And so we say climb at night because all you can see is that 1 meter in front of you from your torch or your flashlight. If you have a good flashlight, maybe 3 meters. And he says, just don't look up, don't think too much. Just look at the 1 meter ahead of you and keep walking. And you'll make it. Don't think too much. That is actually a microcosm of the entrepreneurship journey. Entrepreneurs tend to think too much. Or you have the very passionate ones who you think they should have thought a little bit more, right? And it's very hard to find those who are in the moderate middle, who have thought through it properly, but then when it's time to act, they don't think too much. And that's what happened with Abraham, right? The lesson is, if God had said, okay, this son that I've given you after, was it a century of praying? Okay, this son, I want you to climb this mountain and sacrifice him at the top. That would have been really hard for Abraham. You know why? Because I've been torn like that before too. I know God brought me to Africa. I know that this is my calling, but I'm also the oldest son in an Asian family, and you have duties as a son. And we think it is God-given duties. Okay? We're thinking, okay, I need to look after my parents. They're getting older. That is a duty. But yet God has called me here, so this is also my duty. Which one is it? What should I do? I can't see the correct direction in which God wants me to go. And entrepreneurs go through this a lot. Most of the time, entrepreneurs have to have deep conversations with their spouses because their journey is so all-encompassing, not just their time and energy, but their mind space as well, right? This is family time, this is weekend, but the entrepreneur is thinking about his work. And we kind of need that for a business to succeed, but you're torn between your two duties. And Abraham was torn between the duty of being a good, dutiful father to look after your child, which is your God-given duty, and killing him because God said so too. If you are Abraham, you're completely torn. You have no idea what to do. But God is just telling him, climb that mountain, one step at a time, and at the top of the mountain, I will provide. You could be torn completely, you have no idea what to do, but just like the guard said, or the ranger said, focus on that one step at a time, just keep climbing, believe in yourself, and you will get to the top. And at the top, God will provide for you. So I know I've been on the entrepreneurship journey before, and the most dreaded question is always when people go, yeah, but how are you going to do this then? How are you going to make this happen then? And you don't have an answer? Most of the time, you won't have an answer. You're not Superman. It's not like someone has done this before and written a book for you. You're an entrepreneur. You're challenging new things. You're breaking norms, and you're traveling, a journey that nobody's traveled before. Of course, you don't know everything. Of course, you don't have an answer for everything. That's just your business journey, your family journey, your faith journey. As an entrepreneur, you're going to come to places where there are crossroads. You don't know the answer. Even the spiritual answer, the faith-based answers, you don't know the answer. And that is fine. If you truly feel that you're called on this journey, keep climbing one step at a time, and God will provide. And so you get to the top, right, of the mountain. It is tough, by the way. We were walking basically about 10 centimeters a step, and we're just breathing really heavily. It was an 8-hour climb from 10:30 p.m. to 6 when the sun came up. We climbed a distance, or we walked a horizontal distance of about 4 kilometers. And we climbed an altitude in those 4 kilometers of 1,500 meters. And this is the next point. Sometimes not knowing where you're going, or not knowing where God is leading you, and not being able to see it is a blessing. Because if God shows it to you, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. It's just terrifying. It's like, no way. Like the guard said, right? Most people will give up if they can see the end. And yet, as business people, we want to see where we're going. We want to tell people, well, this is the goal, and I know I can get there because I've prepared this and I've done that and done everything. But in reality, sometimes that goal is tiny. God has way bigger plans for you. But if He showed it to you before you started on the journey, you wouldn't go. Okay? With God, you can achieve heights that you never even imagined, that you would have feared to imagine. But you can do it if you just remain faithful, one step at a time. Okay, so this is one of my father's favorite verses. I hope you guys can write that down and look at that verse whenever you hit, a challenge. On the mountain of the Lord will provide. Genesis 22:14. This was the morning when the sun came up. We got to the top. It was breathtaking, and I mean that literally. There was so little oxygen in the air that the group, we were joking. We were saying, nobody take a deep breath, because if you take a deep breath, the rest of us are just going to fall over and die, right? Just be generous with how you breathe. But then we got to the top, took that photo, and we descended. And now it is mid-morning, and we looked behind, and we saw what we achieved. It looked like that. We climbed that. Now, on day 5, I can't describe to you how much pain I was in. My feet, my legs felt like they were going to break. It's so much pain. And if on that day they showed me this, and it's like, okay, this is your last day, I would have been like, no. Sometimes God just wants to surprise you when you look back. Okay? So stay faithful. Today's task is today's task. Take that step and believe in the Lord, and He will guide you to heights you are not going to be able to imagine today. Amen? Thank you. All right, so today, who's going to take that leap of faith and pray us in? It's not Kilimanjaro, guys. It's just a prayer. All right, there we go. Anything you like.
Good evening. I'm not going to go, and I'm going to do so imagine that Jesus is sitting on that chair, and forget everything else. So let's pray. said, imagine that Jesus is standing next to Jude. So we're focusing on him and forgetting everything outside of here and whatever we left at home.
Blessed.
Okay. Dear Lord, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for making us. And we thank you for making us Ugandans, putting us in this very beautiful nation with a lot of beautiful things, innate people. And we thank you for the privilege to take this course and all the things we're learning. Even this evening as we are here, we pray that you help us to focus and give us a good understanding of what you want each and every one of us to do as we do this course, as we're done with this course, to bless this nation. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're back to business. All right? I hope you guys found yesterday's session really disturbing. Okay, disturbing, but also I hope that you will trust the Lord through all of this. Literally, the entire world is going through a period where we just don't know where we're headed. But trust in the Lord one step at a time. Now, as we promised yesterday, we're now moving from the kingdom layer down to the macro environment layer. And as I said, it gets more and more technical as you get to the middle. By the time you get to the middle, we're talking about, cash flow and stuff like it. It gets very, very technical. Why? Because you need to make decisions. You're in control in the middle. You're less and less in control of things as they go out. Today, we're talking about the macro environment layer. And again, it's hard to give you strategic frameworks because there are not that many decisions you can make in the macro environment layer. So what we're going to be doing, rather than telling you, okay, here's a framework for macro environment and this is how you're going to make your decisions, we're going to give you the categories of news, categories of developments that you need to be up to date with. Okay? You probably need to be reactive to some of them, but hopefully you can be proactive because you have all that news. Okay? But it's not going to be that technical. Technicalities will start coming in next week. Today is Liberation Day. I liberate you from technicalities. Okay? So we're in the macro environment layer. And as I mentioned before, each layer is an individual game of chess that you are now forced to play. You cannot not play that layer. You can't say, I'm not going to look at the macro environment layer. My job is my business. And so I'm just going to look at my business. You don't have that luxury as an entrepreneur. You have to play all 5 layers, all 5 boards of that chess game. And each layer has unique threats and opportunities for earning revenue, for serving your fellow man, and for building God's kingdom through your business. It also has unique strengths, or let's say your business will have unique strengths and weaknesses in that level, on that chess board, okay? And it's going to be unique from other businesses. It's going to be unique from other layers. You could have a very clear weakness in one layer, but a very clear strength in another layer. Take your business, dissect it, and make sure you know what your strengths are and your weaknesses are in your business, okay? So today, chessboard number 2. The macro environment layer, okay? Once again, it's strategy, so these are the questions that you ask yourself in each of those layers. Today at the macro environment layer, who are you in this layer, right? Where are you? Not just geographically, but where are you in the stage of growth? Where are you in the landscape of competitors? Where are you? And where are you trying to get to, right? Oh, sorry. Who is your ally? Who is your enemy today? And several steps ahead as well. Maybe you want to change course of action if there is a enemy or obstacle a few steps ahead that you know you can't face, then change direction. That's strategy in a nutshell, right? All right. So what is the macro environment layer? It is basically what you would see on the front page of a newspaper. It's that big. These are big developments that you have almost no control over. You might have control over it if you're the president of the nation. You might have control of it if you are, CEO of MTN. Okay, but we're talking about these macro levels that the normal John Doe, the normal person, probably won't have any decision power over, but needs to be aware of. That is the macro environment. And however, it will have huge effects on your business, and it's going to be full of opportunities for you to exploit with your strengths, and full of threats that you must avoid, knowing your weaknesses. And it comes down to 6 categories. Today we won't have time to look at all 6, so we'll look at 3, at least 3, and if we have time, we'll look at 4. But by the third one, I'm sure you get the point. Okay? There are 6 categories in the macro environment layer, and if you go to a business school, they will call it the PESTEL framework. PESTEL, PESTEL, political, economic, social, cultural, technological, environmental, and legal. These, again, are big issues that you probably don't have control over, but you need to be aware of. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one, the political environment, right? So this would include things like diplomatic affairs, visa, and we'll get to that, but your visa tells you a lot about you. Okay, which country you're able to get into without a visa, or which ones you can get in with just visa upon arrival. That tells you a lot about the diplomatic relations of your country, or the country whose passport you hold, and the country you're trying to get into. And it affects greatly trade, tariffs, and everything between your two countries, right? So visa. Government stability, obviously, right? Regulations, tax, etc. This is not an exhaustive list whatsoever. There's a whole list, but you get the idea. Political factors. Now, I want to tell you a story before we get into that. This is the Rothschild family crest. Who has heard of the Rothschild family before? Good. I'm sure you have. And I'm sure you have, okay? The Rothschild family in the 19th century and the 20th century, they were a Jewish family that became the wealthiest family who owns the wealthiest bank in all of Europe. And at that time, that means in all of the world, 19th, 20th century. And the family basically had their big break during the Napoleonic Wars. So that's 1803 to 1815 or something like that, if I remember correctly. How did they do it? Well, they used diplomatic relations and political factors completely to their advantage. So the Napoleonic Wars are raging. England is fighting France. There are the Prussians, who are gone today. There are the Germans, right? There are the Lithuanians. They're all fighting. Europe is in war. But the biggest opponents are France and England, right? The big enemies. And they had a small bank in Paris, in London, not huge, but small. And I think Vienna and a few other European countries. But they knew who they were. We are a small family bank that has bank branches in most of the major countries that are fighting this war. So what do? At the end of the wars, this is when Wellington is almost going to defeat Napoleon, right? In the Battle of Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo, which is the decisive battle, is looming. And the whole world is going, so which one's going to win? Which side's going to win? And while the whole world was thinking, should I side with England or should I side with France? Baron Rothschild was thinking, I'm Jewish. I don't need to side with anybody. Instead, I'm going to tell the people in London, right, in our London branch, that, oh no, France is going to win the war. Sell stuff. Like you sell and don't hold on to your assets. They're going to lose the war. France is going to come in and take everything. And they made it so convincing that they did start selling. They're especially selling their real estate. They're selling their gold. They're selling all of that and trying to get enough cash so that they can escape somewhere. Things like that. Okay, they caused a lot of chaos. And they did the exact vice versa in Paris, saying, oh no, London's going to win the war. He sent his sons, to spread this misinformation in the two capitals of the two biggest powers running or fighting each other. When he did that, it doesn't matter who wins the war or who loses the war. Everybody sold everything to the Rothschild family. And then the war ended, and as you know, France lost, England won, but it didn't matter. From that battle onwards, the Rothschild family, for about 2 centuries, became the wealthiest family in all of Europe and all of the world. Political factors, sometimes you can't control it. The Rothschild family was not able to control the war. They weren't able to control what France is going to do diplomatically with England, or vice versa, but they could control banking. Because that's who they were. They knew who they were. They had a very acute understanding of what they're good at, misinformation, and what they're bad at. Okay? And they exploited the political scene, the diplomatic scene, and for 200 years, you can't beat the Rothschild family in banking. Even today, they're a huge player in what we call the international shadow banking industry. Okay? Political factors. Now, today, there is a war raging in Ukraine, as we know it. And I'm mentioning this because I want to bring it to 2023. Avoda had we have a board meeting with our US board members once a month, okay? And for a very, very, very long time, we have been talking about the next destination for Avoda's expansion. For a long time, we have been thinking Asia. Not because I'm Asian, just Asia, right? And we've been thinking maybe Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, but we need to expand, right? Just a month ago, when we brought this topic up, this country was mentioned, Ukraine. One board member mentioned it. The other board members' initial response, we're all on Zoom so we can see it, one of them went, like, what on earth are you thinking? But the others were like, ha, oh, right? You could see that in their eyes, like, oh. So what are they thinking? Well, this is who we are. Okay, I'm giving you a demonstration of how at Avoda we're also strategic. We're also very aware of who we are. Who are we and what do we do? Well, this is the macro environmental criteria for Avoda's next destination, or any destination for that matter. We are looking for countries that have a Christian majority population, either 50% or more, or a Christian population above 20 million, right? Because you saw the content yesterday. It's not really going to fly in a country that does not have enough Christians. We are here to serve Christians. We're here to serve Christian businesses and Christian entrepreneurs. And so, number one, that's who we are. That's 1/10 of who we are. Number two, obviously, there has to be strategic alignment with everything else we do, with our kingdom vision, with all of you, the businesses you guys are going to start. There has to be some kind of alignment, some kind of connection. Number 3, we're Reformed Christians. So we wanted to have a strong connection already existing in that country with either me or the board members or our church. Okay, there has to already be an existing network. We can't go there from ground zero and say, okay, we're going to start making connections here, right? Goes without saying. Number 4, because of our model, we are a model that requires donations, but also a lot of business opportunity, right? Our budget, Robert knows, is half donations and half we're raising it through revenue, through consulting. We consult the Japanese government, JICA, JETRO, banks, and so forth. So that's the other half, right? So it has to be a country, of course, where we can foresee strong donations either continuing or starting over the next few years. There has to be international support, international sympathy for that country. There has to be both Christian and secular people who want to help people in that country. Are you starting to get Ukraine a little bit here? Number 5, the for-profit. Once we get there, we are not going to rely completely on donations. So there has to be, in our current business network that we're consulting, an existing connection. When we get there, we want to know that immediately we're going to be able to make revenue from consulting. And we have to think about where is the world's businesses, construction, infrastructure, all of these infrastructure-related businesses going to pour their money into in form of capital flows in the next few years. And if they do that, then the banks of their countries have to facilitate that, so the banks are going to go in. Which country right now is a country where we can anticipate huge capital flows over the next few years? By foreign governments, not by the country itself, but that's where we thrive. We act as the bridge, especially between Japan and the United States and that country. Where? Number 6, Avoda is following a model that I think a lot of you guys will follow. We start with donation dependence, and then we gradually work our way out of donor dependence into donor independence. So there has to be strong interest from current Avoda's consulting network and clients, including the government of Japan, including the ministries in the United States, including the banks. Well, yeah, there is strong interest. My friend who consults the Prime Minister of Japan always tells me she has a meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan once a month. Says every time we meet, the Prime Minister is always saying Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Because of our pacifist constitution, we can't send troops to support Ukraine, and we look bad because the rest of the G20 is sending troops to support Ukraine. And here we are twiddling our thumbs. What can we do for Ukraine? Well, the answer is, he's answered it himself. The Prime Minister says, well, as soon as the war is over, we're going to put so much money into that country to help them rebuild because we're good at that. Japan is also strategic. They know what they're good at. When the tsunami hit, earthquake hit, 120 kilometers of bullet train railroad was destroyed, brought back to life in about 2 weeks. That's how fast Japan can rebuild. Because of earthquakes, because of natural disasters, that's second nature to us. The airport was completely flooded. It disappeared under the water for about a day in Sendai, that area. And it was open for business in 5 days. That kind of speed of rebuilding is not possible in other countries. Japan can do it. And so he's like, that's where we're going to go. That's how we're going to help Ukraine. But we're only going to be able to do it if there is a Japanese person there. And then number 7, we want to be in a country where people in Africa can go to and be the helpers, not the beneficiaries. Okay? And it's hard to find countries like that because for such a long time, Africa has been stereotyped as those who need help. Well, of course, everybody needs help, but in every country, there are people who are willing to give help. Now, if a country is torn by war, and we ask some of you, please come, there is a business opportunity here that's going to help people and make you money. That's a dream come true for Avoda. Okay, for a lot of young Africans, it might even be the first time ever where they are the ones who are doing the helping. They're doing the economic assistance. And that is going to do such wonders for their pride, their self-esteem, their confidence. And that's also one of the criteria, political, macro criteria that we were looking for. And Ukraine definitely fits that bill now. Costs, and I'm going to get this in a minute, but did you know that employment in Uganda is costlier than in Ukraine, even before the war? An accountant in Uganda makes way more money than an accountant in Ukraine, even before the war. And we'll get to that in a minute. What? And why? Well, Eastern Europe is not rich. It is pretty poor. But unlike Africa, they do not have tons and tons of nonprofits, the UN, World Vision, these nonprofits coming in and hiring people at $3,000 a month. And so their average pay is organic and low. Here in Africa, you have all of these big organizations coming in, hiring people at Western rates or near Western rates, and you're skewing the average. And that, ironically, makes it more difficult for foreigners to work with Ugandans because you're more expensive. But unfortunately, you're not benefiting from that expensiveness. Okay, so there is a very, very fundamental issue with a country that has gone past a certain growth that continues to rely on nonprofits and donations. You are killing opportunity for the next few generations. Okay, but we'll get to that later. Location, we want affordable and manageable transportation to and from Uganda. It's 6 hours flight. Time zones, similar with Uganda, you're only 1 hour apart. These are factors that you can't change, but you can make use of. And so, regardless of whether we actually go to Ukraine or not and expand into Ukraine, this is how you strategically look at expansion using the macro environment layer, and in the macro environment layer, particularly in this case, the political environment. Okay? So who are you? This is who we are, and so Ukraine does look like a good next location. But who are you? Which country matches you? There's a lot of study to be done. Okay? Now, political, another point that we'd like to talk about is the most powerful passports in the world. You do probably want to work, if you're going to export and do business with other countries, part of the political scene is you want to work with a country that has, whose population can come to your country very easily. Not only can they come very easily, if they can come easily, it means that your trade relations are better, your tariffs are lower, costs are lower, and all of that. Now, in 2023, I am proud to announce that Japan has the most powerful passport in the world. 193 countries. Japanese citizen will not need a visa. Okay, they would actually go in, get off the plane and go into the country. Uganda is one of 4 countries in the world that does not allow Japanese citizens to arrive without a visa, what do you call it, a e-visa, okay? And that's kind of sad. But hopefully that's going to change sometime in the near future. In fact, I checked today, and Uganda doesn't allow anybody in without a visa, right? Is that correct? Oh yeah, East Africa, correct. But other than the East African bloc, everybody needs to sign for an e-visa. Is that correct? I'm not sure. I'm asking.
Few Asian countries that can come.
A few Asian countries.
Yes, where we also can go without.
No visa, or visa on arrival.
We can go without technical visa. Maybe.
Okay. Okay, good. Anyway, I don't know for sure. My information may be wrong. I just Googled it. Okay, but check that. That is also part of the political environment. You can't change it, but you can make use of it, and it should inform your strategic decisions. Now, another part of the diplomatic relations is exit. I've mentioned this to a few of you, but it is the reason that a lot of Ugandan companies, African companies, need to start from grants and donations is because there is very little equity investment opportunity. When a business starts, there are, broadly speaking, only 3 ways that they can get capital, right? Equity, selling equity, loans, and grants / donations, right? These are literally the 3 big, broad categories. And in Uganda, equity is hard to come by, or it's hard to sell equity for capital to start your business. Why? Because you can't exit. A lot of people don't get this, I think. And maybe you have a very different way of looking at equity and stake or shareholders or shareholding here in Uganda. But in the West, if someone buys your shares, they're not looking for dividends. Dividends are so small. I mean, if you're just looking for dividends, it's going to take you 10, 20 years to get your principal back. That's not what you're looking for. So what are you looking for? Control in the company? That's what you fear, but that's really not what they're looking for. Okay, unless they actually have interest in controlling your company. If I invest into a company, equity into a company, I don't want to sit in board meetings every month. I don't want to have to make decisions for the company. I just want them to make money for me. That's the normal thing, okay? Sometimes they're hostile buying of shares because they want to control you. But that is not as common as an investor just wanting a return on his investment. That is way more common. So how do you get a return on your investment? Not by dividends. You have to sell it at some point for a profit. That is the main return on investment. In 1 year, if it's Silicon Valley, you sell it for 300%. Or whatever that is, the rate over here is. But you can't do that without a stock market. Where do you sell it? If you sell it to a stock market, it's called an IPO, right? Initial public offering. That's usually how people exit, how angel investors, venture capital people exit in Japan or the United States and so forth. That is why they invest in your equity. Here, you do have the Kampala Stock Exchange, but there's not enough volume or depth or liquidity. These are the 3 things that make a stock market worth its salt. You need depth, volume, and liquidity, which it doesn't have yet. Okay, I think there are just like 10 give and take companies listed, right? That's not a market yet. People are not going to buy and sell shares on a daily basis every second. It's not going to happen. So how do you sell your shares? How does the equity investor get his money back? He has to find, not IPO, not public offering, he needs to do a private offering. He needs to find someone himself who would like to buy these shares that he has at a price that is higher than what he bought it for. He has to find it himself. And he has to convince that person to buy it from him at a premium. And he has to find someone to evaluate those shares, a professional to evaluate those shares. He says, well, it's now worth twice as much as when I bought it. And he has to evaluate and say, well, here's the calculation. This is the cash flow for the last 3 years. This is how much revenue that he has to do all that work and finally convince the buyer, potential buyer, that it is worth the amount that he's trying to sell it for. That's a whole lot of work. It's almost impossible, right? So how can you use diplomatic relations to help alleviate that situation? We have several companies in Uganda who are doing that very famously. Easy Matatu. Did you know that their operations in Uganda is a subsidiary? Their main office, the head company, is in the US. And so people can invest in their company by investing into a US company, and the US company can sell it in the stock market. Be aware of these diplomatic relations. With Uganda, you can do that in the United States. There are other countries also who welcome that kind of, we call shell company, right? And it is welcome, they attract, they keep inviting these shell companies in. The top 7 in the world are Switzerland, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, Jersey, Luxembourg, Bahamas, and then the United States. And in the United States, it's by state. So some states don't, but Delaware is the most famous one in the United States. So if you have friends who are Americans, because you're going to need American citizens to be able to open an American company in America, right? Or if you have friends who are Swiss or, I don't know, Luxembourgian, I don't know, right? Talk to them for the future of your company. Right? Talk to them and say, can we host the company in your country? You be one of the founders, and this Ugandan operation, this Ugandan business will be a subsidiary. That way, you can have access to all 3 categories of capital investment or capitalization, okay? Which makes you more powerful than even a Japanese company trying to raise investment. Why? Because a Japanese company probably cannot go for donations. It's not a thing the way it is over here. Over here, it's almost like normal. If you want money, you go for, fill out a grant application, and chances are not bad that you're going to get something, right? In Japan, no way are you going to get money. People don't give money for free in Asia. I told someone this before, but the suicide rate is very high in Japan, extremely high. And one of the reasons is, literally, Japanese people would rather die than ask someone for money. I would rather die than face the humility, or what do you call it, the humiliation of having to ask someone for money. And they won't give it to you either, right? Okay. So why do it? A lot of Japanese business people who were laid off during the financial crisis, dark times, they continued putting on their suit and tie in the morning and pretend to go to work. They cannot face the humiliation of telling their wife and their family that daddy lost his job. And when the time comes where it's just impossible, I have to tell it, a lot of them actually take their own lives. There is a pride, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, okay? I'm not saying do that. But there is a huge canyon of perception about this issue between Africa and some Asian countries. So donations, not a thing. But here, you have access to donations and grants. You have access to loans. The interest rate is high, unless you're a Voda student, of course. And if you can make equity also available to your company, you are in a very good position, okay? It's technical. Further down this program, we will talk about all of this. But for now, I'm just bunching it under the macro environment and the political sphere. there are countries you should be working with, or at least considering working with. Government stability. Well, as of today, we're celebrating 37 years, right? Now, I know, by the way, nobody in the world loves their government, okay? I did this social experiment. So I know, a lot of people complain about governments, and I'm saying you're not alone. Everybody in the world complains about their government, okay? I did this social experiment when I was in banking and I had travel. Like I was flying once a month, twice a month to different countries. And I thought, might as well use this opportunity. The first thing I do, get to the airport, I get on a taxi, and I ask the taxi driver, so how's the economy? And I did that to about 10 different countries, in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East. It's almost always the same. It's like, it's bad. It's really bad. It's like, why? It's like, the government is raising taxes. They're not doing their responsibility, and the wages are low, the pay is low. Every country. Germany, same thing. Japan, no, we are fine. But it's an exception. And you go to the States, same thing. It sucks here, man. Like, economy sucks, we're tanking, man. So, okay. So when we say government stability, let's put that into consideration, okay? You might not be 100% satisfied with the Ugandan government stability. I don't know. I haven't been here long enough. But I want to let you know that from external eyes, Uganda is one of the most stable governments in East Africa. From external eyes. I know this because I work with a lot of government institutions and so forth abroad in Japan and so forth. And this is one of the first 2 or 3 things they will mention when we say, is Uganda a good place for investment? They will talk about the location. It's next to Kenya, and so the economy is trying to follow Kenya, and so there is bandwidth to grow, stuff like that. But up on the top list of 1 to 3, there's always, it's a stable government. Well, of course, there are goods and bads, pros and cons, so when it does change, right? So yeah, I get it. But your government, as of today, is very stable. It's remarkably stable, okay? So don't discount that. In fact, be proud about it when you talk to investors. Do mention it. It is one of the biggest fears in Western investors' minds. 37 years. 37 years, okay? Yes?
Taking you back to the previous slide.
This one?
No, the previous one. In the media world, island nations usually very infamous for tax evasion because they encourage companies to open up shell companies, which I'm sure you've always seen big investigations which bust companies for opening up shell companies and not respecting the tax for the countries they're working for. So something you can highlight on as you encourage.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good point. Cayman Islands, for example, is notorious for tax evasion. And Bermuda, for example, right? Bermuda Triangle. Money is not the only thing that disappears. But every single institution or financial system can be exploited for unfair play, for foul play. Shell companies is just one of those systems. But there's plenty of just as heinous crimes in other banking systems as well. Okay, so it is up to your conscience, it is up to your practices to use it in a lawful way. There's nothing wrong with doing it itself. Okay, but if you're domiciling your funds in the Cayman Islands and you're not reporting it here in Uganda, well, that's bad. Don't do that. right? But there's nothing wrong with domiciling it. Make sure you report it, make sure it's clean, it's transparent, and there's nothing wrong with that. I hope that you don't look convinced. Okay, all right. Okay, so stability. Other political issues would be tax, right? We mentioned tax. Someone mentioned tax. But did you know that the corporate tax in Uganda is not high at all by international standards? You feel that way, but it's not high at all. It's 30, so that's you're tied at, I think, 10th place together with all these countries for corporate tax, right? 30% corporate tax. Let's take a look at other parts of the world. US, 21%, UK, 19%, China, 25%, Japan, 33%. Japan's corporate tax rate is higher than Uganda. Denmark, 22%, okay? So Uganda is fair. The tax rate is not bad at all. So render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, okay? Don't evade your taxes. How about personal tax, like income tax? Well, Uganda is at roughly 40%, and then you add like NSSF on that. I know they're in the news these days. 40% plus, I think this actually is including a little bit of the pay as you earn into the 40%. And you think, oh my gosh, that's almost half my pay. This country, well, take a look up and below you. It's not that high. This is what governments do. And you say, well, but that's like an African thing. Okay, let's go. Income tax elsewhere. US, 37, only 3% different. UK, 45. UK's tax is above Uganda. Japan is at 55%. Denmark at 56%. Income tax, personal income tax. Yeah. So next time you think about complaining, exactly. So whether it's fair or not should not only be measured by where you stand in the global rankings, but has that money been, do you see that tax working for you as a citizen? It's true in Japan, I pay heavy taxes. But for some reason, I don't feel bad about paying it. Okay, I love Japan's infrastructure. It's incredible. Everything is super convenient. I've had some friends from abroad come to Japan. They're like, the roads are so smooth. You know, they actually put a little bit of rubber into the tar of most of the roads, and so the cars, when they're driving by, it's smooth. They make almost no sound. And then they introduced electric cars, and there literally was no sound, and they started hitting people because there's no sound, and people wouldn't dodge the cars when they come up behind them. And so now they had to include speakers in the cars that make car noises. Okay, so I mean that's a bit too much, but you know the infrastructure is incredible in that country, right? So you feel like the tax is working for me; it's fair for me to pay it. Well, the thing is, here in Uganda, I can't remember which economist is who said this, but you can measure the development of the country by how much of the population is being taxed. How many percent is being taxed? In a fully developed country, usually 100% is taxed. That means that it's not about the percentage that you're taxing the ones who are being taxed. It is the percentage that you're taxing the entire nation. In Japan, 127 million people, right? Here, pay your taxes. Pay your taxes, it's for the future, okay? I know you don't see it now sometimes, but that's also because not a lot of people are paying it. There is a huge informal sector that is not paying it, and that is why there's still some work to be done, not just by the government, but by the private sector. Don't beat me up for saying this, but it's kind of true, okay? I'm just talking from a macroeconomic
But the money that is embezzled is also quite much.
Yes, embezzlement of government funds. I am on tape, so I'm not going to, especially not on Liberation Day. But I also want to tell you that government embezzlement of funds is everywhere. You know which country is the most famous for it? It's not Africa, it's the United States. Huge funds, massive funds. Japan, you think, oh, corruption is low. Because you're a developed country? No. Because you're a developed country, the politicians are just better at it. They're better at covering it. But it's everywhere. Okay, so I'm not saying, hey, stop complaining, you guys don't have it that hard. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is these are things that remind us that the political sphere, all of that, we are one citizen of it. When you do your job as a citizen, when other people are not doing it, it feels like a sacrifice. But that is not a reason not to do it, because business doesn't just belong to you or your employees, it belongs to everybody in the country. It belongs to future generations. You have to pull your part, okay? If you want more detail, you can always come talk to me. Where do I find all this information? Note these down. My favorite is actually tradingeconomics.com. Amazing charts, and I'll show you a little bit of them later. Finance.yahoo, the Economic Complexity Report by the OECD, and the CIA Fact Book, World Fact Book. I think some of you guys probably have stumbled on it by now when you check things up. Really, really good stuff. Okay, it is actually compiled by the CIA, so might as well use it. Okay, let the U.S. taxpayers pay for that. All right, let's take a look at economic factors. Now, 10 years ago, well, 11 years now ago, a lot of you may have seen that the World Bank said, hey, including Uganda, 11 of the fastest growing economies are all in Africa. And 10 years ago, you're all going, uh-huh. Right, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it, right? Half a year ago, Uganda became a middle income country too, right? Now, regardless of what you think, Uganda is growing. It is definitely growing. Africa is definitely growing. They say there's never a smoke without a fire. For someone to be able, even for the head of state, to be able to say something like that, there has to be enough buildup for it to not sound absolutely crazy. Okay? So Uganda is growing. Africa is growing. There's no doubt about that. But that was 10 years ago. Those of you who came to some of the boot camps also know this. But the tables have turned. Today, African companies are the ones buying out European, Asian, and American companies. This is quarter 1, 2002, so 1 year to date. Total value of extra African, non-African, M&A investments made by African companies. Okay, so African companies making M&A, merger and acquisitions, of extra African companies. That has never been very high until last year when it just shot through the roof. While the world was suffering from COVID, okay, Africa has been making investments. So there is a tipping point, and that, what you see here, possibly is a tipping point in the global state of affairs. Whether that continues or you're going to see it spike down again, I don't know. But the fact that this could happen, even if it's 1 point, that is a tipping point. And in these investments by African companies to global companies, the biggest sector has been mining, energy and utility sector. And the second tier has been pharma, medical, and biotech. Interesting, okay? So if you are in one of these sectors or thinking about going into one of these sectors, know that that sector is garnering international attention today because of what happened. But also, Africa has the unique advantage of being able to, like I said, source from all three pools if you are good at it, okay? Because the world still does look at Africa as a recipient of aid. And they should. There are lots of African countries that definitely need aid. They need the NGO structure. They need the foreign assistance. Okay, there are 54 countries. Some of them are like that. But some of them are like Uganda, where you're kind of not here, not there. When a country hits that stage of growth where it's not here, not there, there quickly becomes a wide gap between the winners and the losers. I mentioned this, I think, yesterday, okay, because that's where there's going to be a spurt of capital into that country by three channels, which will no longer, some of them will no longer be available when the country goes past that stage, or if it was below that stage. There's this one stage in the growth of a country where all three channels are open. Japan, in fact, my country, pledged $30 billion for Africa in August last year, over the next 3 years. Within 3 years, that's $10 billion per year. I think Avoda is a beneficiary of that. A lot of our revenue does come from Japanese government projects. Okay, so you guys are taking up the tax dollars in Japan, my friends, and praise God for that. Okay, so another economic factor that we all talk about, obviously, is inflation. Okay, the first one is economic growth. So the first one we just kind of touched on is economic growth. You do have an advantage, especially if you have a holding company that's abroad, you have three channels for capital investment. And the world is investing heavily in Africa, both in terms of equity, in loans, and donations. Africa is still a very favored destination for all three, in a way that Japanese companies are not, in a way that Indonesian companies are not, or Australian companies are not. You guys, in your generation, I hope that there are a lot of Christian entrepreneurs who make use of this period of Uganda's growth. The next one, though, is when an economy grows too quickly, what you see is inflation, right? Inflation itself is not bad. Inflation itself is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. Inflation, put in simple terms, is economic growth. Did you know that? So for a developed country, the ideal inflation rate is about 0.5 to 1%. That is a healthy economy. What is unhealthy, always, is deflation. Deflation is never good for any economy. That's shrinking of the economy. Or they call it chilling, right? Inflation is heating up. People are buying and producing more. Usually, and I'll explain later. But all I'm saying is inflation is not a bad thing. For developing countries, the ideal inflation rate is about 2%. That means that prices are going up, and hopefully, so are therefore wages going up, right? That's what inflation does, right? Prices go up, but in a healthy inflation environment, that also means that when prices go up, companies make more money, they can afford to pay more wages, and that's how an economy grows gradually. And 2% is actually ideal. When it becomes deflation, it means people are not buying, companies have to lower their costs and prices, and they have to fire people. So these are two economic pressures, inflation, deflation. For any country in the world, moderate inflation is always a good thing. However, what we're seeing today is a global inflationary cycle that is not caused by production and consumption. It is artificial. And that means that prices go up, but wages don't. And that is bad for any economy, obviously. Okay? This is Uganda's inflation rate, the blue bars. January 2022, it was at 2%, 2 point whatever percent. And by the end of the year, you were close to 11%, okay? And it's tapered off a little bit. That is too big of a hike. It is not healthy for the economy. And you're thinking, oh, my country. But it's not just your country. That black line you see here is Japan. The Japanese inflation rate has also gone up pretty much. I mean, because it's such a huge economy, the numbers are going to be a little bit smaller, but it's pretty obvious that it's following the same pattern. This is a global inflationary pattern, and Uganda is just one of the 197 countries experiencing it. If you look at Uganda's inflation rate over the past 20 years, you realize that it's not even as high as it was once during the global financial crisis. And you are here at around just over 10%, but you've been there before. Okay, so one thing that makes a huge difference in a country is how optimistic people are or how pessimistic people are. When you have a population of 45 people constantly complaining about the country, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have 45 million people saying moderate things about the economy, that also becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have some countries, very rarely, who are very optimistic about their country. And I don't mean North Korea. That is artificial optimism. I mean, we've seen this once in Singapore, where I think I've never seen this happen in a different country before, but people loved their government, and they constantly say good things about their government and their country wherever they go, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not necessarily that case anymore, but the optimism of people has this not even indirect, but a direct effect on the economy. So if we're going, oh, the tax rate is too high, inflation is too high, it's not good, then that is what's going to happen. Okay, so in Christian terms, be thankful for what you should be thankful for. And inflation is just kind of one of those things. It's not as bad as you think. It is bad. I'm not denying that, but it's not as bad as you think. Interest rates are heavily influenced by inflation. Right? This is another economic factor that people have to look at. And in Uganda, yeah, you have huge, soaring interest rates. I was shocked because I didn't know about interest rates in in Uganda until I came here. And I realized it's kind of that way for a lot of African countries. In fact, most of them. 26% for a commercial loan from a legitimate bank? In Japan, that's criminal. Absolutely criminal. My brother just bought a house. Both of my brothers just bought different houses. They got a, housing loan, right? I think at 0.3% interest. $1 million at 0.3% interest. And that's normal. What?
I'm moving to Japan.
Yeah, but be careful. The reason Japan can't afford that low interest rate is because Japan is in deflation, not inflation. When inflation is high, your interest rates are going to follow. When you are in deflation, interest rates will also follow. I believe, I have to check again, but Japan's interest rate, what we call central bank rate, the key rate, is negative right now. Okay? What does that mean? Basically, the central bank has to pay banks to take loans which the banks can give out to the economy. By the way, I hope you understand the flow of central bank, and economy. Okay, when the central bank raises the rate, that doesn't necessarily mean that at the consumer level the rate is going to go up immediately. That's up to who's in between. That is the commercial banks. The commercial banks borrow from the central bank, and then they give to the market commercial loans using that money. That's how the system works, right? When nobody is borrowing money because the economy is too old or the economy is not doing well, then what happens is these banks in the middle don't make money. And if these banks don't make money, the central bank has to pay them to get loans so that they can give it a tiny interest rate to the market to entice people to borrow and do business and something that they wouldn't otherwise do. That's how you have a negative interest rate, so that when the commercial bank borrows from it, at least they make a profit even if it's 0.3%. You get what I mean? Okay, so before you go to Japan, Isaac, I just disclaimer, yeah? Okay. Okay, but here you see 100%, 150%. This information is all from the Microfinance Institute of Uganda, something like that. And the 150, bank is blue, and that's the amount of loans in that category. That amount at that interest rate, co-ops, NBFI, non-banking financial institutions, NGOs give money out. NGOs, man, what is that? 160%? And nobody in their right mind would borrow at 160, but it's because it is such a short-term loan. If you say, hey, I'm going to lend you $100 today, 10 days later, can you give me $110 back? That is 10% in 1 week. When you compound it over a year, you get numbers like that. But they never hold it for a year. That would be suicidal, right? But if you put it on a chart, it looks like that. And that doesn't make the lender's sin any lighter, okay? So interest rates are high. So what do? You come to Avoda. At Avoda, we are using arbitrage with between the United States and Uganda so that we can give you rates that are significantly lower, which can't happen if you're going to a commercial bank. And some of you have heard about the AVIX score that we're keeping. We are monitoring you, your attendance, whether you're late, whether you're paying your tuition on time, your grades, how much popcorn you eat. There is a camera that is recording everything. And we convert that into numbers, and we give it to the lender in the United States and say, this person is trustworthy or not. This person is eating too much popcorn. I don't think he's going to live that much longer. I don't think we should give him a 10-year loan. I don't think he's going to live that long. No, but all joking aside, we create your credit score for you because there is no credit score available, readily available in this country for startups. They do exist for large corporates, but not for startups, okay? So we're doing everything we can to make sure that Christian startups in Uganda get the funding they need. Because this makes it almost impossible to start a business in the normal route, okay? We won't go through the inflation stuff, but you probably know, okay, might as well. Okay, normal inflation is people start buying things. There is enough wealth, people buy things, so prices go up because people keep buying things. When prices go up, the companies who provide those services, they can pay better, and then you get inflation, healthy inflation. The inflation we're seeing now is people are not buying. Prices are going up due to other factors, not consumption. It's going high because of supply chain disruptions. It is going high because of electrification, right? When you, like in the United States and other countries, are saying we're going to be zero no more gas-powered cars. It's going to be all electric. What happens is, because there's not enough demand, oil prices shoot up. Right? It's artificial. It's not organic. So regardless of what you think about electric cars, when you use legislation to change the economy, you can skew the inflation rate so that you're not getting healthy inflation, you're getting an, what do you call it? A mutant version of that. That's not very helpful. You have people who don't buy, this is deflation. People stop buying things, prices go down, wages go down, and you get deflation. Okay, so this is always unhealthy. Inflation is sometimes unhealthy. Another economic factor we definitely should look at is unemployment. The UICEA, the University Council of East Africa, said that most higher education graduates are not fully prepared for the job market. Uganda has the worst record, with 63% of its graduates found to lack employable skills. That's not where you want to see your country's name. Uganda is at 63, Tanzania 61, Burundi 55, Rwanda 52, and Kenya at 51%. Now, when you look at these numbers, it's easy to go, man, I'm going to go home and sleep. But I'm going to challenge this and ask you, the Ugandan youth lack employable skills. That's what they said. But the question really is, what are employable skills? For example, Uganda is definitely not short on young farmers. That is a skill that people have, but for some reason that's not counted in this number. Sorry?
It's not counted because nobody wants to be in the debt.
Exactly. It is definitely about mismatch. Yes, yes, okay? And that is also brought about, it's not very healthy. It's brought about by artificially high wages in the city, brought about by foreign companies and so forth, that makes the youth want to go there and not work on the biggest revenue generator of their country. One great thing that we could do in Uganda is make farming sexy again, okay? Ugandan unemployment rate, you think it's high, but the blue is the US unemployment rate. The black is the Ugandan unemployment rate. They're following the same pattern. Okay, I think if you're like me, you'd be surprised. Because the reason is this, Uganda's unemployment rate is not that different, because what you're looking at in this case is unemployment. You're not thinking about what we call underemployment. I think the underemployment rate in Uganda is extremely high. Underemployment is not that you don't have a job, but you do have a job, but it's not enough, right? So that in Uganda would be a very, very high number. So what's going on here? If you translate the problem, I think that Ugandan youth lack skills for the job types and salary types they desire. They want to be in a nice building. They want to be in a suit. There's not enough demand for that kind of job, right? And therefore, the skills they acquire in university are not what employers within their reach are seeking. And so what we call this in the rest of the world, we call it a mismatch. There's a matching problem. There is a lot of skill, but it's not the skill that the employers are looking for. Where are the employers? The really organic employers that are core to Uganda's society? They are in agriculture. I kid you not. They're not in banking. Okay? We need to really help the youth build their country by strengthening the farming sector. Farming is just one of it. There are lots of things where within the youth's reach, there are jobs available, but it is underemployment. So solution number one is probably going to be there are jobs that really, really are lucrative that are coming from abroad. Okay, and if you look at Uganda, outside farming and outside big corporate, what are the ones that are coming up really fast that are looking for young employment, young people with skills? Fintech, health tech, mobility as a service or mobility tech, and service as a service. Basically things like I don't know, but things like storage, rental storage facilities, that's service as a service, okay? Tech is huge, and foreign companies come in here, they're willing to pay for tech skills in young people, and Ugandan tech people, young people don't have those skills. So there's agriculture, there's big corporate. Another solution is the tech sector. Andela was here for a long time. Andela is kind of well known for BPO, business process outsourcing, right? In the United States, they need coding, they need C++, they need Java, they need Python skills. In the United States, those skills are 3-4 times more expensive than over here. So if the young people here have those skills, Andela caught that arbitrage. They hired, their model was to hire young people here and pay them what in Uganda is a huge salary to code, but in the United States, where their clients are, that's half the cost. They were here for some time, right there, Sturrock Road, Acacia Mall, and then they left. They went to Kenya, okay? So those are the employable skills. And I hope that young people are looking at farming, they're looking at tech, right? And in Avoda, or we just won a bid, with a contract with JICA last week, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for coders in Uganda, and we can't find them. We tried that for 2 years last 2020 to 2021. We couldn't find coders here. If there were coders here, together with Avoda and together with JICA, we were ready to introduce them to Japanese companies, but we couldn't find anyone that had the skill that we needed. Okay, so if you're looking at young people lacking the necessary skills locally, you're looking primarily at agriculture. If you're looking at young people with skills that foreigners or foreign companies are looking for, is primarily in the tech sector. At least, yeah.
I wanted to just comment the challenge we are having in terms of skills. This is a gap in education. For example, I am an electronics engineer, but the skills that I have, despite of me having paper, were honed through years of practice outside of school, because I started doing this when I was 9. And when I went to school, I did not gain anything except for the piece of paper.
The paper.
Yes. So now, and this is the challenge when you go to someone to hire you, because of the trend of young Ugandans who have gone there without skills, holding a bunch of papers, the companies are not going to hire you because they don't trust that you have the skills. So I believe that is the same way to look at it in all sectors that that go through the normal education system.
So paper and theory versus reality?
Yes, you don't have the skill. The schools don't give you the skill. People pay to get the paper, not to get the skill.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And that's part of our mission as well at Avoda, the What Next. It is What Next for Christian missions. It is What Next for orphanages. There are so many orphanages. They grow up, and then what next? There is, people getting education. They get the paper, and then what next? That is, you're right, the big gap. But thank you. Yeah. So when we talk about skills mismatch in the economy, the other solution is matching. With the government of Japan, we spent 2 years. We couldn't find it in Uganda, which is weird because I am sure they are here. But there is no, well, it's all word of mouth, see. And we can't do that. As a government program, we can't say, oh yeah, no, I know him. He's very good at Python. And that's not enough. We need a proper matching platform. They are here, but I'm not saying they're not here. We cannot find them. That is actually the finding that we wrote in the report that we submitted back to the government. We can't find them. It's not saying they're not there. We cannot find them. We don't know where to go for credible recommendations, credible track record. Not certifications, that's paper, but that will help. But track record, if only there is who's going to start a job portal here? I hope you include tech, okay? And be creative about how to assess that person's tech skills, coding skills, programming skills in a way, in the language that foreigners understand.
Do you have like such a system in outside countries?
Tons.
Really?
Yeah.
Because here mostly what you do, let's say accountants, you just go to like ISPAO, that's like the body. But still under that body, you can't tell like the level, the competence and all that. Everyone who has finished CPA and SCCA is just under that body. But now what you do is hire a recruitment firm, which has like good criteria, skills, and they are maybe also well competent about HR.
Accounting and CPAs, that's possible. Why? Because the paper actually does matter. And it doesn't change. The accounting world changes very slowly. With IT, that's not possible. Because a new year, the world is different. And so the matching platforms that we need for tech industry has to be a quickly evolving one. The criteria evolve, the necessary skills evolve, and so, if that is the biggest growing sector in Africa, tech, then Africa does need its own tech recruitment platform that keeps up the standards, the knowledge, the practice, all of that is changing so rapidly, unlike in accounting, okay? So that's solution 2, BPO. One country that really made use of, let's call it low-wage labor and took the world by storm. China, to some extent. But there's one country that went from here to here in 1 year. India. You guys probably have heard of Tata Consulting, okay? In the year 1999, okay, the world was facing a crisis. When experts around the world were saying, we called it the Y2K, the millennium bug, when the 99 becomes 00, semiconductors around the world are going to fry the cars. It's in everything, right? Cars, buildings, elevators, computers, satellites, military installations, airplanes, all of it's going to crash. Maybe not that bad, but the world was freaking out. We call it the Y2K. So what the world needed, it's not a really complicated thing. It's a semiconductor that runs on two digits for the year to analyze or to number the year. It's not a really complicated thing. It's pretty simple, but it's just the volume is global and it is everywhere. All your phones, everything. And so what the world needed was a cheap desk-side support that spoke English, and then they needed an entire army of them. Okay? It doesn't take a lot of skill. It takes English, a simple manual, but they need tens of thousands of them available any time of day. That's what the entire world needed. 1999. When the world got into 2000, we realized, well, we were freaking out for no real reason. But someone made a lot of money. Tata Consulting went from a small family consultancy in 1999 to one of the biggest IT consulting companies in the world in the matter of 1 to 2 years because of that. That's all they did. They saw the economic situation in the world. They saw the world was freaking out, and they said, we speak English. And we're 1.4 billion. We're going to go in now. And their bet paid off. You know, Uganda speaks English. And I hope I don't sound racist when I say I can understand Ugandan English better than than Indian English. When you have a heavy accent. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I struggle trying to understand sometimes when an Indian is speaking English. I struggle way less, and this is not a racist comment, I'm just fact. It's easier, your English is easier to understand. So you have a lot of opportunity if you just can find a macro environmental need the way that Tata Consulting found during Y2K. And these things, they don't come around often. Y2K doesn't come around often. But when it does, you got to jump on it. You got to serve and serve well and earn money out of it. Ukraine, think about what you can do for the people in Ukraine. Okay, what are these big macro environmental forces working in the world today? Make sure you know. Let's see, what are some other important ones? Disposable income, also part of economic factors, right? How much disposable income is in that country? And in Uganda, the disposable income is not that high, at least on average, it's not that high. You know what disposable income is, right? After paying your rent, after paying your kids' education, your food, your power, everything, your Wi-Fi, which is critical for survival, I know. And after that, what do you have left over? That's your disposable income. I can burn all of that and still survive. Okay, so that's disposable income. Uganda's average disposable income is not that high. And that is an issue. That is an issue when you think about startups. Forbes magazine did this research on what is the top reason that startups fail. And that is no market need. Not no need, no market need. There's a difference between need and market need. Need is what people need, but they can't pay for it. Market need is needs that people have and they're willing to pay for it. There's one more category. Need, market need, which you can translate as demand, okay? And please note this down because I think people here, I've noticed, use these two words very interchangeably and they're not interchangeable. They say there is a lot of demand for something, but is it a need or is it a market need? Unless you have a market need, you're not going to have cash flow. You're going to be depending on donations. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying you need to know who you are. There's one more, though, that we call love or want. You don't need it, but you want it, and you're willing to pay for it. You don't need a Mercedes, but you have the money, the disposable income, and there's nothing wrong with it. You buy it. You could have just bought an old Toyota, but that's called love. That's the love category, right? It's superfluous, but people buy it because it makes them feel good, whatever. Now, in a low disposable income economy, which market makes the most money collectively? The market need?
No, demand.
Yeah, the market need. Okay, that's where most of the money is made. Okay, and of course we're discounting donations. That's not market. Yeah.
I'm seeing something which we can take advantage of. What discussing.
You sure you want to share? You want to trademark it first?
So,
I'm
no,
kidding.
I'm saying that
Is the demand.
now if you're pricing, I see the market need, you vary and say, because people are willing to spend for that demand, you may not overcharge, but have the cash flows coming in all the time. But then for the want, there's also an advantage, much as it dropped down, that these people who like furniture, luxury furniture, or let me compare to hotels. I usually use this model that, okay, assuming the want is Serena, by the time you go there, they know you're willing to spend,
Mm.
and they'll charge you very well for the want.
Mm.
So you can also tag your business in a one. You sometimes may take long, but as long as you meet what they want, you charge them. Or you can be the CJ, Cafe Javas. You can come in, easily accessible, which is the market need. So any way you play it down, it can make you income.
CJ is market need?
A bit.
It depends on who you are. Okay? Thank you. Yes, you're right. The thing is, we're talking collectively. Okay, so here, you're talking about airtime. Airtime, MTN in Uganda, just selling airtime, and Serena selling want. Which one collectively makes more money? Airtime. Because it is a low disposable economy in general. But if this were Switzerland, okay, this happens. Collectively, the want definitely makes more money because there are a lot of people with disposable income who want to buy things that are a little bit better than their dads, okay, or their moms. And so you need to know where you are. Who are you? You are in Uganda. Uganda is still, right now, a low disposable income market. Be careful if this is where you're trying to go, because the costs associated are high. The collective income you're going to make is not going to be as high as if you really hit a home run on the the demands market. Okay? This is an economic factor in the macro environment that you need to be aware of. Who are you? Where are you? You see where the strategy is coming in. Where are you? This is where you are. Know it and design your products and services accordingly. Yeah.
Back to the market need. You see, I want to still bring in MTN. Now, sometimes you find there's already monopoly on the market. Yes, it's a need, but it's already been circulated. It's already taken up by MTN, by Airtel. Because I imagine the main reason why AfriCell collapsed out, like he was totally kicked out. Eventually, he decided to just do internet services, and then they also like marked him out. They brought the best 4G,
Yeah.
5G, whatever. So sometimes you find that with these needs, and I'll bring it down to, for example, my sector, bread is a need. Almost, it's a need. So sometimes you find that if, for example, when you study the market and maybe everyone already is in the market, you might not make as much as someone who has a good strategy, who has already taken up the market and can change. Maybe let me say like hot loaf. Is it what super loaf? That bread, like super loaf. They've already taken up the market, and even if you tried how, they already have a good share. So you make money, but not as much. And yet, if I came in, for example, in my want, if I use Maslow's hierarchy, and
Wi-Fi is at the top,
yes,
right?
Yes. I want to focus on guys who have the money. So I would rather sell, for example, instead of selling like how who will sell maybe 100 loaves of bread, 100 times 6K is about 6 million, 600,000, and I just sell my, for example, I just know if I just bang this deal and I sell this aircraft, I know I'll just live the whole year, and as this guy is just selling every day, I just use like the 80-20 rule, and I'm still like.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely true, but it's also true for this sector. Okay, if you're going to talk about monopolies and brand faithfulness by the customer, that they won't change from MTN to whatever, the WAN sector is actually similar, if not more. Brand faithfulness here is almost immovable. People who buy Audemars Piguet watches, like, well, it's in my family for generations. I'm not going to change. People who are Apple don't change this way very much. People who are here change that way sometimes, but that's because of marketing. That's across the board. And it's true, but it is across the board, okay? But thanks for bringing that up. Okay, maybe we just touch on a few more before we close. Economic factors. Did you know that Uganda biggest export is coffee?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And gold? Okay. Probably going to increase in the next few years. So, please know this. When there are large exports in a certain product, then that usually means that the export routes are established. It's easier to export that thing. Just in terms of the route, not competition. That's a different issue. Okay, so do know your country, what your country is experienced at, and what other countries are experienced buying from your country. Or the other way around, export destinations. The biggest destination of probably coffee would be Kenya. South Sudan is other things. And now, the thing is, with South Sudan and DRC, it's because of Uganda's location. Pretty much anything that comes from Kenya has to go through Uganda and go over here. And if it goes through once, it's imported and then exported again, which makes this really big. Pretty much anything that is shipped to South Sudan from abroad has to go through Uganda. And that becomes Uganda's export as well. But out of Africa, UAE is huge. A lot of it is fresh fruits and vegetables. Somebody here was not here today, okay? So you're right on the dot, whoever you are. Imports, petrol. Well, I'm not surprised at all, right? Broadcasting equipment is very big. Uganda loves to party, I have to say. It's incredible. 3 a.m., 4 a.m., lights, audio equipment banging away. What is wrong with you?
People move from Kenya, spend weekends in Uganda and back.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, ever since COVID, we don't party anymore. I'm like, yeah, right. So that is a great market, actually. People who would not spend 5,000 on the Boda Boda will spend 10,000 for a few beers. They will spend $10,000 to go to an event that has loud music and big lights and LED screens. They will go. So know the behavioral patterns of your country, and one way to find out is not just, well, the other day I saw the party. It's through imports. What does your country need? What is the demand, the market demand? Well, broadcasting stuff, telephones, petrol, people love to drive here, etc. Okay? Import sources, the biggest one is China, not surprisingly. India, UAE, I think that's primarily Toyota and Nissan, and so forth. Kenya as well, I think that's just border-to-border affinity, okay? All right. And lastly, GDP, we always talk about GDP. Know what your country produces the most. The US GDP composition, agriculture is 1%. Industry, hard industry, that's 19. And as a country ages and develops, what grows is services industry. And in the United States, the GDP is comprised 80% by services. And that is where paper counts. That's why accounting, for example, that is a skill that is highly employable in a economy that is predominantly services oriented, legal, accounting, right? Banking, medical, and also, by the way, government. Okay, so government spending is one of the 4 pillars of GDP. Right? Consumer expenditure, government expenditure, trade, surplus or negative surplus, and investment finance, right? Investment. These are the 4 pillars of GDP. So government is huge here as well. A lot of this is going to war, the military. America's a huge military spender. China, not as developed as the United States, so you can see that services is 52%, agriculture is 8%, industry is 40%. Uganda, hey, services at 51%. You are pretty good. Or not. Primarily government, banking, and telecoms. Okay? That's 51% of your economy in terms of dollar amount. And agriculture is 28%. It's still very big. But you think, oh no, it's over 60% of our population. Yeah, but dollar amount, agriculture is not making as much money as one lawyer over here or one MP over here. Okay? So industry, like mining and so forth, is 21%. So know your country. Okay, know what your country is known for. And remember, those are the brands that make sense when you try to look for investment or customers overseas. That's what your country is known for. Okay? I wish we could go through more, but our time's up, and it is a holiday. I did really want to share with you social cultural factors, but if you're okay with it, I'll do it on Tuesday before we go into the industry layer, where we finally get technical. Okay, and so is that okay?
Yes, okay.
Yeah? All right, good. So that's it for today. Thank you for coming on a national holiday. After we pray, you are liberated. Okay? Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this class. Thank you for this week, the very first week of Avoda Blue Class 2023. Thank you for these amazing people who have joined the family. Help Avoda serve each one well. Give each one of them great ideas, transcendent creativity, superhuman strength that comes only from you as they take on this year and their future. Lord, we know that we cannot control the macro environment, but Lord, you are in control of everything. So we pray that through your control of the macro environment in Uganda, in Africa, in the world, that your kingdom will be built, your glory will be manifest, and your name will be magnified. Give us a great weekend and keep us safe with our loved ones. In Jesus' name, amen.